This week on the Destination Angler.
But yeah, Dad pulled some hogs that day, Steve, and from that point on, I was just blown away. I remember actually leaving all sad, right? And I'm like, I didn't even catch a fish because this isn't a river that you're gonna come here if you're not a someone who's really gonna put in the work. You may not pull a fish. It's not easy. They're here, but they're smart. So you may get in there and you may rustle one and he win, and you might not have another chance. It's just how it goes.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haigh. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. And by Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. We've got some great shows coming your way. First, small stream fly fishing in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And then we're headed to West Texas in the Devil's River, which is an oasis in a rugged and remote desert. No kidding. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on Cayo Cruz, Cuba. Cuba is quickly gaining a reputation as the place for world-class bonefish and permit fly fishing, reminiscent of the Florida Keys from 60 to 70 years ago. You won't want to miss these shows. And remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. Hey, and if you like the show, please tell a buddy. Want to be the first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler website and become a subscriber. This week's winner of a beautiful handmade landing net by New England Nets is Tom from Philadelphia. These are exceptional landing nets that will complement your catch of a lifetime. Congrats, Tom, and thank you for listening. And today our destination is the wild and scenic Clarion River, and our guest is trophy brown trout hunter Don Cameroni, owner of Brown Trout Addiction Guide Service, Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. The Clarion River might just be the most underrated fly fishing destination in the state. Because years ago, the Clarion was quite a mess, but starting in the 1980s, a massive cleanup effort began, and today the water below Johnsonburg may be some of the best trophy brown trout water in the state. In 1996, the Clarion was designated one of only 2 rivers in Pennsylvania as wild and scenic, and in 2019, it was named Pennsylvania's River of the Year. A little bit about our guest. Don grew up just 60 yards from the Bighorn River, where he used to fish for giant rainbows with night crawlers. When he was just 11, his family moved back to Pennsylvania, where Don remembers the day his dad caught 3 trout in the upper 20s on the Clarion. Now he makes his living guiding clients and working as a live line gas welder. Today, Don shares stories of running meat, as he calls streamer fishing, for wild browns, caddis hatches of biblical proportions, and why guiding brings him so much joy. So if you want a shot at a personal best brown, then put the Clarion on your bucket list. Let's hear from Don. Well, hey, Don, welcome to the show.
Steve, how are you?
Yeah, man, I'm hanging in there. How about you?
I'm doing well. It's been a while.
I know it. I'm glad we could catch up, man, and talk about the Clarion River.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
All right, so I got to ask you, you do guiding, obviously. That's why you're on the show, but you also do something really interesting for a living. I know you're out of town all week. Tell the listeners what you do for a living, besides guiding.
Steve, I work in the natural gas industry. I travel around very, very often. Like every week, it's somewhere new. Could be West Virginia, could be Pennsylvania, Ohio. We do specialty work, and we basically weld on live lines, tap them, and give new gas supply to an area. And they'll run it through a regulator, drop it down the pressure, and supply your homes and businesses all throughout. We do some pretty interesting work, very high risk work.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, when you follow procedures, yeah, we weld on live lines.
Live lines. That sounds a little crazy to me. How's that work?
So natural gas doesn't explode without oxygen. So you can basically, there's a whole list of procedures, but you go through and you x-ray the pipe, you UT it, you get the thickness, you make sure everything is good metal, and go ahead and weld a piece of pipe onto it and then a sleeve, and we put a valve on, and then we'll drill a hole, back out of that, shut the valve, disconnect our tap equipment, and there'll be a new gas supply.
How about that? All right, man. Boy, have you been on the river lately?
I was just on the river last week. Actually, we had some youth anglers with us. That was fantastic.
Nice.
And then I got shipped out for the week, did some natural gas work, and here I am getting ready for another Saturday trip and Monday trip coming up. So looking forward to that.
Good, good. How'd you do with the kids?
Oh, they did awesome. I actually, it's a memory I won't forget for a long time. These boys were so enthusiastic, asking questions like most adults don't ask. And these were young boys. These were 8 and 12 years old.
I
And they
love
just
that
loved
age.
the sport. Oh my gosh. It was magic. The one boy had a 21-inch male on.
Oh,
I got the net. We got beside the boat, and it got below us and broke it. So lost that one. We got downriver, and the other boy wound up hammering a really big female. And that was probably 22, 23. Didn't put it on tape, but just a gorgeous fish.
wow.
Yeah, great time.
I mean, that's, the more you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and I found you on Instagram because I said, who's this guy posting these pictures of these gigantic brown trout over and over and over again? And I pulled it up and it was, the Clarion River. And I'm like, where the heck is the Clarion River? So I started investigating this. I'd never heard of it. Then we talked and it's like this amazing trophy brown trout river. But maybe tell us where is the Clarion River?
Well, the Clarion forms in Johnsonburg, Steve, where the east and the west branch come together.
Okay.
And the east branch has a dam up above, so there's always cold water. That's one reason that this fishery is so good. It gets us through those summer months. And then the west branch, it comes in, they meet in Johnsonburg. From Johnsonburg, it's about 7.5 miles to the town of Ridgeway. And that whole stretch in there is designated trophy trout water. It is all tackle, but its destiny is, fly anglers love it.
Yeah.
Early spring is, you'll see the guys show up with the meat. They're throwing big streamers, same as us with the high flows. But this year was a little different because we didn't catch a lot of snowpack. The flows dropped off fast and tactics changed quick.
All right. So let's back up for a minute because years ago, like maybe some people from Pittsburgh, I think you're just north of Pittsburgh a little bit, might remember the Clarion River is not so desirable. Like what's happened with the Clarion River over the last, what's it been, 40 years? They've been cleaning it up. What's been going on there?
Well, years ago, it used to be almost like black. You couldn't really see into the river. And you'd see some suspended solids that were, kind of whitish color. And there was still a lot of big fish in there. They survived most of the time, but it just really wasn't somewhere that you would find yourself wanting to fish. It didn't appear to be a pretty stream or river that you would think this is where I want to go fishing. So nobody really fished it years ago.
Yeah.
And then it started to clean up as the years went on. The paper mill got more involved, put some great efforts into cleaning up the river. They do some stocking from their little fish hatchery that they have inside the paper mill. They stock not the Clarion River, but the east and the west branch and some of the other local streams for the Boy Scout derbies, and they do some good things. So they've came a long ways, but there's still a little ways to go on getting that river where it deserves to be.
Okay. Yeah. And the paper mill is still there, correct?
Yep, very active. I think it's got 400 employees there. They're very busy. Every year about this time they have a little outage, and unfortunately the other year they had a mishap, and kind of where things started with me really paying attention to what was going on with the paper mill and the discharge and how it was affecting the fishery.
Yeah. Well, how is it? You say more about that. Like, how is it affecting the fishery?
Well, we've done some studies. The bug life is definitely being affected. The discharge temperature is 97 degrees.
Wow, that's no good.
So they have a thermal variance from about 20, 30 years ago. I think 20 years ago, they got a permit thermal variance where the East Branch Dam is supposed to release water to help mitigate that temperature. The problem with that is June, July, and August, we already got low flows. It's a very touchy situation. If it's not released at the right levels, that water on the upper section gets extremely warm. We've been seeing different algae come in and smallmouth bass move up earlier in the year, there's some great smallmouth in there as well. It's got some big fish.
Sounds like it. Are there plans to change that, where they're not able to release that?
So what I've got gathered is they have been operating under their permit guidelines 99% of the time, but there's still a high release of suspended solids that you can see on low flow days that make nymphing very difficult. So their permit was up for review this year, and there is some changes going to be made after the study on the stream. They got the evidence that things are being affected, and the suspended solids that are being released are at levels that are acceptable in the permit. But I believe what it comes down to is the way that it's being sampled, which is being pulled through a 3/8 OD vacuum hose. And I believe it doesn't collect the samples other than what it can through that hose. Sometimes flows will be like 300. You could pick it up. You'll see it every now and then. The other, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, I seen flows were at 500, and it was everywhere. So I called in, I made a report and asked to see the suspended solid report, and it came in fine, came in under permit levels. So it's not that the paper mill is doing anything intentionally wrong. They try to do the right thing. I honestly believe that. They're working within their permit limits, which is they have every right to. But where I've taken it to is getting the study done, pushing it through DEP, getting the right people involved, the fish biologist and everybody else. It's all the way up to the permit writer. Everybody's talked about it, seen the study, reviewed things, and the permit's going to be adjusted.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm not positive to what effect, but I know that they're going to work on the suspended solids that are getting released. But they can't tell the paper mill, hey, you need to do this. They can only write it up so that they can only work within the means. So if they're discharging 97-degree water and the East Branch Dam maybe cannot release that much because we didn't get a big snowpack this year, I'm concerned how this summer is going to play out.
Things could heat up.
Yeah, so in that permit, I'm hoping that it's going to say something along the lines of it needs to remain at a flow level through these months so that it cannot heat up. Or, maybe they need another cooling tower and adjust that 97 degrees and drop it down. 10 degrees would even be feasible.
Right.
We're hoping for the best too. It's been about 5 years I've been working on this. I've got lots of GoPro footage. I've got samples sent in. And, it never really came back that the paper mill was doing anything wrong. It was always within their limits. So that's why we had to take it to the state and let them kind of run their program on the aquatic life and how it was being affected. And it turns out that it was. So
yeah,
we now have evidence to adjust the permit.
Well, thanks for all the work you're doing for all of us, Don. That's great.
Yeah, that's what it's about. It's not just me. I grew up on that river since I was 11. I fell in love with it. The first time my dad took me there, he caught 3 monster trout. And I just thought to myself, this place is like somewhere out of a dream.
Ha.
Coming from Wyoming, back to Pennsylvania, the fishing was completely different. I grew up on big rainbows right on the Bighorn River in my backyard that I would catch as a little boy and put in the bathtub. That yeah, my mom would tell that story, but coming from catching fish like that to moving back to Pennsylvania where there's not a lot of big trout in every stream that you're going to fish, you pick up beautiful fish, and there's some nice native streams and a lot of stocked waters and different species of fish to target, but it was different. And then I found the Clarion River, and it just, most of my teenage years were spent on that river, hundreds and thousands of hours.
Kept you out of trouble, huh?
Mostly.
That's good to hear. Hey, anglers. Well, you've heard me talking about Angler's Coffee now for over a year now, and I have a question for you. Have you tasted it yet? If you have, then you know what I'm talking about. It's darn good coffee, isn't it? And if you're like me, tasting's believing. And believe me, this coffee tastes great. My wife and I are hooked on it. That's because Angler's Coffee offers an impressive spectrum of flavor profiles, so there's something for everyone. Like their smooth, medium roast El Care Caddis blend. Using beans from Central America and Indonesia with a perfect balance of body and aroma, the Caddis blend gives creamy sweet tasting notes of milk chocolate and clove. It's a real crowd pleaser. Save 10% with a custom subscription like I did and pick the coffee blends you want delivered to your doorstep. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So put a smile on your face and give it a shot. That's anglerscoffee.com. Tasting's believing. Hey, let's back up for a second because I want to hear those stories about you growing up in Wyoming and then coming back to Pennsylvania. But I'd love to hear just like, what is it today that you love about the Clarion River? What makes it so special in your mind?
I think it's the fact that it can hold a 30-inch brown plus that is grown up in a river, not a lake-fed stream, so to speak. Like these aren't lake-run trout.
Yeah.
So that next cast, you never know if it's going to be the one, I think is what keeps me going. And over the years, I've seen the waves of the big fish. It seems like in the early 2000s, Steve, I could pull a fish 25 plus weekly.
Wow.
Then I've noticed you catch a lot of fish. Recently, the biggest we've been pulling is 24-inch.
Not bad. I'd take that.
Yeah. Very respectable fish. And the fight that these fish have are like no other. And the tactics that they use to try and elude you when you do hook into one, like they'll get below you and they'll gator roll you and cut your line or pull your nymph.
They gator roll you.
Yep, they'll get behind and they'll just flop and spin.
Huh.
That's something that I don't experience on other watersheds.
No kidding.
Yep, I've had them run me by rocks 3-4 times just trying to cut my tippet. Like absolutely knowing what they're doing.
Might have been caught before.
Maybe, but I mean, they're absolutely smart fish.
Yeah.
It's always something that's rewarding, when you outsmart a fish like that.
Absolutely. So what's a decent day for you? Are you catching fish in the high teens, low 20s on a pretty regular basis?
Yeah, that's a daily deal. Like we can usually pull one fish that would range, like I said, nothing over 24 recently, but the average you're going to pull would be the 16 to 20 range. It's not a numbers thing, even though there are large numbers there. I just saw a caddis hatch come off this year that was like no other, and the water was boiling with fish, and it absolutely blew my mind how many fish were there.
Really?
It was insane. But when you fish it, brown trout, obviously, they're very elusive. So it doesn't take much to spook them off. If you make the wrong cast, it's over. And they usually give you one chance. After that, you might as well move on. It's very slim you're going to pull that fish.
Right. Do you feel like, have you caught the same fish over and over again? Do you feel like you recognize some of these guys?
Some I have seen again, but it's not like you're gonna go there and "Oh, I caught the same fish I did yesterday." That don't happen. As weird as that sounds, it don't happen very often. I don't know if they move that much or if they're weary after being caught. I'm not sure, but they're like a one-time thing. Now in the winter, Steve, I'll start fishing late December, and that's like my time to fish because I'm not with clients, so I fish December to March is my time.
Huh.
And a lot of stonefly action. Or if I do decide to run any type of streamers, depending on the flows, it'll be a slow plug and stop and hesitate and strip. So, a little slower tactic, but very effective. But stoneflies is my go-to in the winter. Love it. I'll run stoneflies all the way till April.
Okay.
They'll be like my number one thing.
You're nymphing all winter then.
Mostly, yep.
I thought you might throw some streamers in the winter too.
I do, but it depends on flows too. If that water gets clear and it's low, I'm gonna nymph it.
Okay.
And if I got flows around 300 plus, I'm gonna run some meat. 300 and down, like you can nymph that pretty well. 3 to 400's pretty good, like running zonkers, muddler minnows. The smaller 2 to 3 inch streamer, woolly buggers, something like that. And then when you get into the flows from the 4 to 600, you're running dungeons, maybe 5 inches, 6 inches. In the 800 flows, I'm running meat 6 to 8 inches long, even more sometimes.
Okay. What's your favorite big meat pattern? Something big and articulated, or what are you throwing?
Yeah, most of the stuff I run is articulated. Dungeons, sex dungeons, things like that. Drunken Disorderly. I love that big deer head, big feather on the back. I like to just watch that. And it's something that it's such a rush. I'm sure and this has happened to you where, you're stripping for maybe a half hour, nothing's happened, and finally you get that set on a big meat fly. That's awesome.
Yeah, bam. Time
Yeah,
to wake up.
exactly. Yeah. And you put in a lot of work when you're running streamers, so when you do get a pull, it's very rewarding.
Yeah. What are these big browns? You say they fight really good. Like what's typical of a big brown? What do? Are they up in the air pretty quickly? Or are they just down low? Does it vary?
Yeah, so I don't see them jump too often. We had a couple jumpers this year, but mainly they'll buoy down. They'll make a couple quick runs, and 9 out of 10 times these browns want to get downstream of you. So if they start heading that way, I'm walking down with them. I try not to let too much pressure.
You're out of the boat now.
Yeah, if you're out of the boat, yeah, you're walking down with them. If we're in the boat, I'm pulling anchor and going with them because they will break us off.
Right. What tippets are you running?
A lot of Cortland, Umpqua, Rio.
4X.
Yeah, 4X, 5X. And then when we run streamers, I'll run 2X.
Oh, okay.
And summertime, I get into 5X, but I run a Douglas LRS. It's a 6-weight 2-piece. I do nymph with that in the early season, and I'll run a stink tip 3 on it. So I'm getting down there, and I almost fish it like a wet fly and swoop through because the flows are so high. And I do like to keep a distance from these fish, even when the flows are up. They're smart. So you get out there and you stumble around a little bit, it's going to be a dead water.
Like how far? When you say distance, how far?
Yeah, all 20 feet will be like average.
Okay.
Like I'm fishing the other side of the column.
Are you throwing these streamers down and across typically, or what kinds of things are you doing with the streamer?
Yep, down and across, but also, and again, it depends on the flows, but I do run them. I'll run them up, and I'll keep my tip high, and I'll plug them. And I'll let them sink, and I'll plug it, and that's very effective.
What's that mean? Plug it.
lift your wrist and just lift towards the sky and just give it a quick snap about 4-6 inches and almost let it dead drift and strip it in as you lift up. The second it starts to fall, you got to strip in that dead line and always keep tension there.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep it off the bottom because, you know, the current wants to push it down. So when you're fishing it at that angle, it works out. But if you get too far upstream, it's not effective. You got to have a slight angle to it.
Do you find the fish hit it on the way down typically, or?
Well, it depends on it. Both ways, though. I pull them a lot like that, almost like nymphing, where you can fish it down, you can run them down, or you can go across and swing them down through and strip them up. And I'm not somebody who typically, a lot of guys will be like, oh, I'm going to start fishing close to me. I fish where I believe the biggest fish is going to be. That's my first cast. And I feel like your first cast is one of your most important. You can either blow that hole out with catching a small fish, or you could throw it in the right spot and catch the biggest fish that's dominating the hole. That's the strategy I use. I go for him.
Love it. That's awesome. Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking Trout Routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Give me a sense of how deep the water is. Like, what are you looking for there?
Typically, we're like 3 feet and under. There's some deeper holes that I would guess to be maybe 8 feet deep. Most of the flows, though, around 300, you're fishing 2 feet to 2'7".
Okay.
You know, that's like great fishing, that mid-2 range.
Sounds nice. Yeah. Sounds wadeable. Is it fairly wadeable? Are you in the main stem at this point?
Yep. So it's fairly wadeable, but one issue is a lot of the land on the river is posted. So access is very tough.
Okay.
That's why it's become such a great drift fishing destination, because you can't really access all the spots you would want to.
I mean, can you go down? What are the rules in Pennsylvania? Can I drift and get out and walk the bank, or what are the rules?
Yep. So it's a navigable waterway, so you're allowed to be on the bottom, even if they own both sides. If it's non-navigable, then it's an issue and you can't be on the bottom. So as long as you're in the water to the high water mark, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like I'm on Trout Routes, and it looks like from Johnsonburg down to Ridgeway, I don't see any public. It's all private,
No.
huh? Okay.
Yeah.
And below Ridgeway, looks like there's quite a bit of public water down there.
Yeah, and it gets into Allegheny National Forest down there as well. It's that's where the wild and scenic starts on the Clarion River.
Okay.
And it's like, I think it's about 51.7 miles. And it runs from like State Game Land 44 to a trib at the backwaters of Piney Dam. And it's beautiful down through there. I mean, you'll see eagles and otters and minks, and there's a lot of wildlife.
Nice.
But you get down that lower end, you're getting into some big smallmouth territory.
Okay. So it kind of switches from trout to smallmouth. How far down from Ridgeway does that happen?
I would say you could fish about 30 or 40 miles of the river from Johnsonburg and be in big fish territory.
Okay.
For wild browns. Now, I'm not saying they're not downriver, because they are. They absolutely are. But as temperatures warm up, obviously they're going to seek colder water. So where do you think they go? They go up top.
Yeah, start heading up.
They catch that water coming out of East Branch Dam, and that really helps this fishery make it.
Right. Say more about the upper parts. So you've got the east and the west branch. What's it like up there?
So the West Branch it's smaller. It's probably, I would say, at its biggest, maybe 20 to 25 feet wide, if that. It's a small fishery. It's really windy. It does have a fly only, no wade zone up there. It's, I don't know, maybe half a mile long or a mile long. But it does sneak some wild browns in there. So you never know what you're going to pull up there. Especially early spring, we seem to bump into a few every year.
That's awesome.
And then the East Branch, so I would say that's probably, it's got a lot of good rainbows and brooks in it, but I don't see a lot of the wild browns up there. And they do have right below the dam at the discharge, they have, I believe it's an all tackle or a delayed harvest. I think it's delayed harvest area.
Okay.
And it's some good fish in it, in very cold water. It's beautiful. Like, you go in there in the summertime, that's where the fish are because of the temperature,
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful little section.
Yeah, it looks nice. Well, kind of back to your fly patterns. Does color make a big difference in those streamers?
For us, the best color and choice is yellow with some orange and some brown, like tiger stripe in it.
Huh.
Any of those seem to do great for us. And we can run some browns with some tan in it. Those do pretty well. I kind of steer from the olives. I know they are effective in the clearer water, but we're picking up more algae in the river now, and I think that's due to the discharge temperature being 97 degrees. It's starting to grow in places it never did. So I can't say that that's what it's from, but I believe that's what it's from.
Interesting. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story. You started talking about, living in Wyoming as a little kid. So what took you guys out there?
So my dad was chasing the oil rigs back in the 80s, and he started working on the rigs, and he went out there, got a job, and my mom went out there, and he was working a lot, and we lived in Thermopolis. It was probably like 40 to 60 yards from the river. So I had this black lab dog named Lindy, and me and her would play on the river every day growing up. That's what I did.
On the Bighorn River.
On the Bighorn River.
No kidding.
I know times were different back then, okay? Like, I couldn't imagine if my kids did the things that I did. So one story that I still remember is I would climb on the inside of the bridge that went over the river. I would walk the iron out there so I could see down into the river and hopefully see a big fish, and then go back to the bank and try and catch it, obviously. But, I was actually walking under the bridge.
Yeah.
On the steel. So, yeah, the Wild West back then, Steve.
Yeah, is that right? You could do that,
Yeah,
huh?
but that's how much fishing has been a passion of mine. Like, I've just pushed myself to the limits over the years, and it's never felt like anything more than peace to me. So every time I'm out there, I just enjoy it. And it's kind of led me to where I am today with getting other people involved and showing them the river and giving them the opportunities that I grew up on and love. And there's been so many people that came through and caught their personal best brown trout, and just shared that magic moment that makes it all worth it.
Yeah, that's great. Oh my gosh. And you said earlier that you used to throw these rainbows in your bathtub.
Yeah. So I would catch them. I would even go out at night and catch them. And I can remember the first time that I caught a ling. Are you familiar with what a ling is?
Never heard of it.
It's like an eel looking fish, right? So
Okay.
this thing was probably 2 foot long, and I pulled it out of the water, and I thought it was a snake and freaked out. And I ran back into the house, and I tell my dad, I'm like, I caught a snake. And come out, he's like, that's a ling, it's not a snake. And
Huh.
But, I was out there all the time, day and night. I just was out there fishing.
Wow. Worms mostly, or what were you using?
Yeah, back then it was night crawlers, man. Growing up, we would fish with night crawlers.
Yeah.
One tactic that was a little different was, I remember my dad had this little, kind of looked like a Visine bottle, but it had a needle on the end, and he would blow them up. And he
Blow
would
'em
put
up.
a sinker on for me
Huh.
and cast it out there, and I would sit there and fish, and that worm would kind of just dangle right in the strike zone, floating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just a matter of time.
Yeah. So are worms better than flies? Come
Well,
on, be
I
honest.
can't
Gotta
answer
be
that,
honest.
Steve, because there's some times that you cannot pick up a fish on anything but what's hatching. So
Yeah, good
I
point.
think it comes down to conditions.
Yeah, well, sometimes a squirmy wormy works good.
It does. Yeah, squirmy wormies work, especially after rain. Some people will say, "Oh, I really want to fish that river as the storm just starts and as the river is on the rise." I hear a lot of people say that's great, but for me, fishing that river on the fall allows you 2 or 3 days of absolute prime fishing. If that river, say it climbed up to 600, 2 days from now, it's probably going to be at 450. Another day, you're at 300. So you're hitting different flows, different clarities in a short window that gives you opportunities that if you're fishing it on the rise,
Yeah.
you may pull a good fish, but your window's short. Sometimes up here in the mountains, when it rains, you have 2 hours and it's brown. It's over.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So fishing that river on the fall is very effective for me.
So even with that tailwater, you still get muddied up pretty quickly, huh?
Yeah. The West Branch brings a lot of mud in. The bottom of that, I believe, has some sand in it that really gets mudded up.
All right, back to your childhood a little bit here. Tell me about those big trout your dad caught one day that kind of blew your mind.
Well, back then you were allowed to keep 3. Okay. And there was no regulations on what you fished with or anything. And he wasn't fly fishing at the time. I believe he used to fish a wax worm, and it would be on a size 16 single hook. So he's basically fishing like he's fly fishing a nymph, right?
Yeah.
And where I first started, he would always stand up the top end of the hole, and I would be on the flat. And it was kind of about, I'd say it's a deeper section right there. It's probably 2.5, 3 foot deep there on the regular. And where he was, there was a nice channel and ripple up there. Well, I hear him, I got a big one on, and he starts coming down with it. He brings it down towards me, and he gets it in the net. And I mean, the head was out of the net, the tail was out of the net. Thing was just gnarly. And the color back then, because the river was still catching some pollution from the mill, these fish kind of were like chameleons where they adjusted and they got darker. So they weren't a bright copper, they were a deep reddish brown
Yeah.
tone to it,
I've seen trout like that. I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you find them like that. But these were it was almost like they all were that way back then. And I think it had to do with the color of the water. And I also noticed back then that there was a lot more crayfish. So, the crustaceans, I think, add a lot of color to them. But yeah, Dad pulled some hogs that day, Steve. And from that point on, I was just blown away. I remember actually leaving all sad, right? And I'm like, I didn't even catch a fish because this isn't a river that you're going to come here if you're not someone who's really going to put in the work. You may not pull a fish. It's not easy. They're here, but they're smart. So you may get in there and you may rustle one and he win, and you might not have another chance. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
He wound up pulling 2 more big fish. We left, and he took me to a stock stream, which was Bear Creek, and they had just recently stocked that, and I had a great time. I caught, the limit I think back then was 7 or 8, and we didn't keep these fish, but I think I probably caught 10 or 15 fish in an hour, hour and a half. So he went, caught his trophy trout, and he was happy. And then he took me, and, you know, I'm 11 years old, so getting into 10, 15 fish was just awesome.
Yeah.
But
Oh
I'll
my
never
gosh.
forget that day.
Yeah. Were you fly fit? What were you using back then?
Back then, we were bait fishing.
Okay. What got you into fly fishing?
Well, I started fly fishing when I was a teenager because my dad would always tell me stories about my grandpa fly fishing. And we had this old Fenwick. And I'm like, well, it was fiberglass. So I started using that, and he would always tell me stories that grandpa would fish a live minnow on a fly pole. So I tried doing that, and, you know, then I would run like woolly boogers and slowly get my feet wet, but I never had a teacher. So it was never like I absolutely knew what I was doing at that point in time, you know. And then I kind of went back to bait fishing, and I did that. So I was in my mid 20s, and then I started to think to myself, like, all right, what's changed on the river? What is the reason that I'm not pulling these giant fish anymore on the regular? Because I truly believe they were still there, but it was just more difficult for me to get them. And I think it had to do a lot with pressure of, you know, it becoming a known river that people like to kayak and enjoy with their families, and there's canoe rentals, and so there's a lot of traffic out there.
Okay.
And these fish, I believe, you know, just the bigger they got, the clearer the water got over the years, the less pollution that was in there, the more weary they are, which totally makes sense. And so I started to fly fish and think about, well, maybe it's the reason that I'm not catching them is because I don't have the right presentation or the right bait or what they want to eat. Maybe they're only eating these certain types of flies. So it was really all about just figuring out the fish is what led me back into fly fishing, just trying to learn what they wanted, you know, what times of the year were they more prone to eat certain things. You know, like I've learned in the winter, stoneflies, you know, tons of stoneflies in the winter. It's ungodly.
What's your favorite stonefly pattern?
So I have it tied by a guy from out west. He calls it Dawn Stonefly.
Is that right? Okay.
I'll have to send you some pictures of it. It looks like a March brown, just with stonefly feather out the top and bottom. So
Okay.
it's kind of cream color, and it's got a maroon wrap around it. And that's my favorite.
There you go.
It's pretty much guaranteed to catch a fish on this river.
Nice. All right. So here you are, you're learning as the years are going on, you're trying to figure out why am I not catching more bigger fish? And you're starting to get dialed in again. And what else did you learn during those years?
Well, I just kind of learned, you know, that there's different seasons, just like there is for the weather, there is for these fish. And they prefer certain things at different times of the year. You know, in the winter, it's low flows. I'm nymphing with stoneflies. By springtime, I'm switching to caddis, and, you know, there's lots of waltz, March browns, pheasant tails with hot spots. I really like to run pheasant tails with hot spots, blow torches. And then in April, I'll switch over. I'll start running brown stoneflies. And they're like an auburn, and they're really effective. And I think if the river has any tint to it from the discharge of the paper mill, which it does have sometimes, those stoneflies kind of match that color, and I think it's natural for them.
Yeah.
And when you fish them through the riffles, when they don't have time to study it, like in the slower water, when they either are going to make the decision and commit or not, you know, run a size 12, or it's almost a no-brainer that you're going to pull one on that fly. It works every time.
That's awesome. So the river itself, I was looking at some videos of the Clarion. It looks like it's moving, but I didn't see a lot of like rapids, but there in this section, the 7.5 mile section, what's that water like?
Yeah, so there's not really any class rapids up there. All the class rapids are on the below Ridgeway. But there's some good running water, and there's a couple. I call this one spot. It's probably the most dangerous spot on the river, and I would estimate it to be the deepest spot on the river. And I don't want to throw a number out there because I could be wrong, but I would say it's 12 feet plus. And when you come down the main chute, it back eddies on both sides. So if you catch that edge, it'll spin the kayak or the canoe or even the drift boat around at a really high rate of speed and could dump you.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I've never had it, dump the drift, obviously, but it came up over. We cut the edge one time, and it
Yeah, close
made
call.
the boat. Yeah, it made it turn so much that it threw water in the boat.
Wow, no kidding.
But typically, I like to fish flows around 800 and down. So for us, it's not really a big issue. Now, when you get down to Ridgeway, there's more waterways that come in. If we're running flows at 800 up in Johnsonburg, those flows are 12, 1300 down in Ridgeway. The river gets a little wider down there.
Okay. I was reading, thanks for sending your bio over. That's super helpful. And I read something that caught my eye. You wrote, I've seen fish that you couldn't dream of, and you wouldn't believe the story unless you've seen it with your own eyes. And I got to ask you to say more about that. That sounds pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah. So the first time that it really happened to me, I had caught a fish and I got him in. I didn't have a net. And I'm trying to get my hands on this fish, and I couldn't get my hands around his tail. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, obviously it's slippery. It winds up getting away. And it was an absolute tank. So I carried a net around for years after that. That was just like I'm fishing in a lake, I'm just like got this giant catfish net or whatever.
Yeah.
Because of the size of the fish that I started to see. And the more time I spent on there, I would have my run-ins with them. And just this year, I was down below Ridgeway, and I'm crossing, and I'm in some choppy water. It's moving, it's a riffle, and there's a good rock out in the center. And behind that rock, it creates probably a 3.5 foot section that's like calm glass water, right? And I'm approaching that, and I look down. I got my polarized shades on. I look down, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a 27-inch male right there. At the same time I see him, he sees me, and he turns and just Goliath. Oh my God. The width of him, I would guess to be 9 inches wide.
Yeah.
Across the backs, probably 4.5. Just an absolute tank, probably 10, 11 pound fish. Absolute tank. And then I seen this beauty the other year, and it actually was this time of the year. It was right before Memorial Day. I came and I went, where was it? Okay, I was downriver, actually just above where I seen this fish. And I went upriver, and I'm fishing, and it's 9 a.m. There's not a lot going on. And all of a sudden, I see an absolute giant female come out of the water after a dry fly. And she's copper tone and got a belly white as snow.
Huh.
Lands back in, splashed so loud it made me jump. So that fish was another 10 plus pound fish.
Yeah.
I went back to that spot for 2 weeks straight, 9 a.m. every day. One day I seen her on the left side of the river. Next day she'd be on the other. And I couldn't get to her. So I had to go all the way around, probably 300-400 yards downriver, cross, come up, try and fish that side.
Oh, you're waiting at this point.
I was waiting, and it comes in a nice channel in the middle that you cannot really get to because it gets too deep. So I feel like she was living out there, but I couldn't fish it. And I had to wait for her to come on these edges and try and fish for her. But the water was so calm, I feel like she just knew I was there every time. And I never wound up hooking up with her.
Oh, man.
I never saw her again. And the worst part was we had a big ice push that year, and it changed the bottom of the river. So that one spot was never the same as it was when I seen her.
Oh, so you haven't seen her again?
No, I have not. Not her.
I
But
hope you
others.
find her.
There's plenty of other big ones.
Yeah. What's your personal best?
29 and a half.
There
I
you
caught
go.
and released that fish on March 11th, 2011. And I was running a flip video back then, an old flip video. And I actually landed the fish and it died.
It died.
So, yeah, no, the video died, the camera.
Oh, okay. A flip video. I was thinking, is that a fly? What is that? What's a flip video?
Yeah, no, it's this really old camera. Like when I first started to get into all this, it was like, what a GoPro is today.
Okay, gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it was just a quick camera that you could turn on fast and record. So I land this fish and the camera died. So I didn't get anything but the release. I got like a 10-second release on it, but I actually have a picture of it. And the biggest fish that my dad ever pulled was 30 3/4 as a female and 13 pounds.
Wow.
Now,
Nice
what I
job,
can
Dad.
tell you is inside the paper mill on the East Branch, there's a waterfall in there. And they do have a fish ladder, but I don't think they really use it. But there's browns that go up there and they stage in that waterfall. And you can't go in that section because the paper mill owns it and they own both sides. And there's a waterfall there, so it's a non-navigable waterway right there. So nobody's allowed in there. Well, years ago, I used to work there.
Huh.
And it's like a hatchery of 10+ pound fish.
All stacked up.
Stacked up, crazy big fish. And I mean, when I talked to the fish biologists, they weren't really even aware of it. And he's like, man, that just blows my mind because the East Branch doesn't have the aquatic life to support them. It's like, I don't understand how they're living there. And, maybe they're getting fed from the people that work there, or maybe I don't know, maybe there's enough, food there for them, but I don't feel like they leave there unless there's a really big flood. And we
Yeah.
don't get those very often that the East Branch floods out. But when that does happen and the East Branch floods out, I'm always hoping and praying to hook up with one of those fish that come down.
Push some of those big guys down.
Yeah, I think that's what helps this fishery too, is that they can get up there and they're not disturbed.
Right.
It's kind of a double-edged sword. You don't get to fish for them. You don't even know they're there. You don't even know that they exist to the common person because you're never allowed in there. But I think that's a huge contribution to the life cycle of this river.
Yeah, that's super cool. Hey, I want to take you back to, you were talking about the caddis hatch, and I'm curious, can you kind of walk us through, if you've got some hatches, what have you got during the summer times? You got some mayflies too, or what have you got?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So like our first hatch usually is the BWOs. And that's like, beginning of April, they start popping off and they're small. They're like size 16s. And then like this year was strange. It was so warm. We hit a window that was like 70 degrees for that week. And water levels happened to be low. And I mean, there was BWOs came off. It was like 9 o'clock there was a hatch. Between 9 and 10 there was a hatch. 2 o'clock there was a hatch. 4 o'clock there was a hatch, and 6 o'clock there was a hatch.
Huh.
So everything kind of just started popping off. The caddis came off at 6 o'clock, so heavy that I was pulling handfuls off of my waders and would throw them back into the river. It was completely covered all the way around my waist. I've never seen a hatch like that come off on the Clarion River. And I think it was due to the low flow, obviously, and the temperature. It was a hot week.
Warm weather, sure.
So everything was just kind of going crazy for that week. It was pretty amazing, to be honest. I got some video of it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
So in this river, we got stoneflies, we got caddis. There's some true flies like crane fly is one of the main sources in there. There's actually sow bugs in there, and for being a freestone stream, you wouldn't think that there would be sow bugs, but there is.
Okay.
That's a little secret for the upper end. If you make your way up there, sow bug's very good.
Huh.
Yeah, and then, like I said, the blue wing olive and March Browns, Hendricksons, and right now the sulfurs are just starting to pop off. I saw them last Sunday.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's a good time. It's always a great time hitting those. And even when the sulfurs are going off, I'll run yellow stones too and pull them. They just get on that color, and basically anything
Month of
yellow.
May.
Yeah, that's it.
Month of May is yellow. Okay. Do you have a terrestrial season, would you say?
I really couldn't say because what I do focus on are pretty much those. So
That's great.
that's something I'll have to pay attention to.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your guiding business. So how did you get into guiding? And I'm kind of curious, what do you love about guiding?
Well, so I kind of reached a point in my career. So I'm a huge catch and release fisherman, no matter where I'm at. I don't particularly enjoy a lot of fish. I do enjoy some like tuna and some mahi mahi, but I'm not a trout man, and I've eaten and it's good, whatever. But for me, I really am attracted to trout. Like I grew up catching them, even in the Rocky Mountains, the little brookies, and here it's more of a trophy to let it go. If I was to go through, I'm a type of fisherman that I'm not an average fisherman. I have my own tactics. They work for me. They may not work for you, but they work for me. And if I go through a waterway and I was to keep every fish that Pennsylvania says you're allowed to keep, it wouldn't be very healthy for that water.
Right.
So that's one of the main reasons that I do it is I just reached a level in my career where fishing, I don't want to say was easy for me, but I had a knack for it, and I've always done it my whole life. So I'm usually a pretty successful fisherman when I get on the water. So when I started fishing for trophies, I didn't want to. I do have one on my wall. I don't know. I think it's 26 inches. I do have a big gnarly brown on the wall, but it's not like I wanted to go keep every fish and put it on the wall. So after I put that one on the wall, I thought, well, I can just take pictures of every fish. I don't need to kill them. So, releasing them, giving someone else the opportunity to for me, when I hook that fish, like the passion and the magic that I experience, I would be taking it away from somebody else if I was to keep it. So I like to give that opportunity to other people. And these fish are they're wild fish. They're magical. They're beautiful fish. They take 5, 6, 7 years to get 20 plus inches. So it's not like you can just replace that fish.
Right.
It's not like you can go to the hatchery and pick one up and put it back. So that's when, protecting the fish should really become a priority of mine. And that's when I got into, I realized, well, to protect the fish, I got to protect the river. And in order to protect the river, I got to look at what's happening. And that's how that all began on, starting to look at what was going on with the river, or the pollution that was, going on. And thank the Lord it's gotten better, but there's still a long ways to go.
Great. And how did that lead to guiding? Or did it?
Well, like I said, I'm a pretty good angler, and I love that magic moment for me. And, I would take some of my friends and my buddies say, hey, I want to catch a fish like that. Or I would take them and they would just, seeing them smile and laugh and, oh, I missed a big one, do all that stuff, put a smile on my face, and made me just as happy as if I had caught that fish. And I think it just comes with the amount of time that I've put into the watershed, that there's different ways to achieve that happiness, and guiding is one of them.
Yeah.
And what's so cool about guiding, Steve, is I pick up anglers that maybe never fly fished a day in their life. I had a lady this year. I've casted once or twice, but I've never, landed a fish. I would love to go and learn some stuff. Her and her son came. She wound up pulling a nice 18, 19-inch fish.
Oh my
We
gosh.
ran that stonefly on an indicator, and out of the blue, she hooks up to another big one downriver, which she wound up losing trying to get it on the reel. But that experience for her, she'll never forget,
Yeah.
and that's magical.
Brought to you by you. Or by you.
Well, I think about my life growing up, and when I look back on it, it was memories like that I remember. I don't remember going to the grocery store and getting my favorite drink or going to the park and swinging on my favorite swing, but I remember catching this awesome fish out of this water. And remember when we went here and we caught that,
Yeah.
so it just falls back to seeing different people. And then I'll have guys come that are expert fishermen and, they want to go hard. I have this one group, they come every year and they're from Harrisburg, PA, and they're streamer fishermen. So they hit us up like second, third week of March when flows are still good. And they just all day they're working meat, throwing, stripping,
Yeah.
really putting in the work. And that's a great time for me because it's a different, for like seeing the newbie to seeing the expert and everybody still having that magic moment when they pull a fish. So there's different levels and like, I don't know, the joy that it brings you from the different anglers it's just priceless.
That's awesome. And you're getting ready to open a fly shop in 2024, is that right?
We're shooting for January 2024. We are going to be in the back building of Mudbeards in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania, which is a really cool shop to already start with. They sell a lot of electric bicycles, camping gear. So it's already geared towards the outdoors.
Yeah.
And the back of his building is going to open up and we're going to rent that out and bring a fly shop to the river and provide anglers with the gear that they need right here.
Good for you, man. That's great.
Yeah, we're stoked. We can't wait. The river's gotten a lot of attention in the last few years, so I feel like with the amount of anglers that are there, it would be great for the community and it would be great for the anglers. So
Yeah.
I think it's heading down the right track. We got in with Douglas fly rods. We got a few tires set up. Jaden Folkroad's gonna tie them streamers for us like he does. I sent you a picture of those. Those are amazing meat. I mean, them browns they smack them, man. If you're running them out there, they're gonna hit them. I don't know if they don't like them or if they want to eat them, but either way, you're sticking one.
Doesn't matter as long as they bite them.
Yep, it don't matter. Yeah, so he's gonna tie some of that. We got Sims, Umpqua, Lamson reels. We're going to be working with cheeky reels.
Okay.
So we're getting a lot of different variety in there for everybody. But at the same time, I'm going to gear stuff that work for that river specifically. We're going to have the fly selections that you need. We're going to have the rods that work up to 11 feet for nymphing. And we're going to have some streamer rods.
Nice. There's some great places to stay in the area too, you were telling me.
Yeah, so Alabama actually has a few cabins on the river on the lower, and if you look up vrbo.com, Ridgeway, there's the Clarion River cabin and a Royal cabin, and I forget the other name, but they'll be on there, and they're great. They're right on the river. Prices range from like $150 to $250. Some sleep up to 8 people. So we got guests coming from out west this week. I'm not sure if he's like Montana. He's in that area somewhere. They're flying in. Monday we have a trip. They'll be staying at the cabins all week long.
Nice. There you go. All right, folks. So there you got places to stay and good river to fish and soon a fly shop right on the river. Tell me about your favorite place at the end of the day to get something to eat and something to drink.
Well, that's what I was just going to tell you. When you round the day up, Steve, if you didn't fish till dark and you still have time, okay, because it's hard to leave that river, trust me. Straub's Brewery Tap Room in St. Mary's, Pennsylvania is an awesome place. Straub's is a local brewery that's been around for many years. They got some great food. And right in Ridgeway, there's a little microbrewery called the Brew Bank. They're pretty cool. And then Wilcox, if you're on the upper end, if you're fishing in Johnsonburg, you can run up to the Dam Inn, which is right on the East Branch River, right on the water. Very nice setting. They got outdoor, indoor seats, great food, and they play a lot of live music up there too in the summer. So it's great atmosphere just to be by the water.
What's your favorite shore lunch? Are you doing shore lunches with your clients?
So we do shore lunches, and I let them choose. If they do a cold lunch, I work with Anytime Lunchtime out of St. Mary's. They're a sandwich shop, and he'll prepare our sandwiches for us. But if we do hot lunches, we love to do ribeyes and bacon-wrapped asparagus on the river.
Ooh.
That's one of our clients' favorite. I sprinkle a little brown sugar on that bacon-wrapped asparagus, and oh, it's so good.
Sounds good.
It's basically like candy on the river.
That sounds awesome. Well, hey, man, thank you so much for being on the show, Don. It's really been great talking to you.
Steve, it's been my pleasure, man. I can't wait to get together and put you on a big wild brown.
Hey, man, I live pretty close to you. I live in Indianapolis. You're about 5 hours. As a matter of fact, I was right through your area 2 weeks ago, heading over to Penns Creek with some buddies. And 5 hours is better than 8, you know? And so
yeah,
maybe
absolutely. We can make that happen.
Right?
Do you have a good time at Penn?
Yeah, we did. We took 13 pastors fishing with Alter Fly Fishing. They've been on my Doing Good segment. And yeah, a lot of pastors are thinking about quitting the church, you know, and so we're trying to help them recharge a little bit. So of 13, I think 9 of them have never fished, and there were a couple of women on the trip too, which was great. So we got them all into fish. We got them all into fly rods. I got a chance to meet Joe Humphreys while I was over there. And Josh Miller from your neck of the woods came in and fished with us. He's a competition angler out of Pittsburgh. He blew my mind. He was amazing.
Yeah, Josh is great.
Oh, you know Josh? Yeah, he is a great guy.
I don't know him on a personal level, but friends of friends.
Oh, yeah, he's going to hopefully be on the show here pretty soon. So, but he came in and then of course we were at the Feathered Hook with Jonas, you know, and he's a pretty hospitable guy. He's got a great sense of humor. So it was a great trip. But we crossed the Clarion River on I think it was I-80, and I looked down and it's a huge river down there. And I thought, man, this is pretty close to home, you know, so maybe next time through we'll stop and fish with you for a day.
Yeah. The one thing about Penns that it has that the Clarion does have that a lot of people don't know is green draycatch.
Oh, you have a green draycatch too?
We do.
No kidding. Okay.
And actually, it's probably coming up, third week of May into the first week of June, somewhere around there.
Okay. That's one to target.
And it's also fun at night.
Huh.
Yep. Definitely a good time at night, too.
All right.
Yeah, but until then, Steve, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can look us up online at browntroutaddiction.com is our website. We pull a lot of people from there, come visit us, and we're on Facebook. That's one of our main websites is Facebook. So Brown Trout Addiction. And you can give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll put you on some big wild browns.
There you go, folks. Give Don a call if you want to check out these big wild browns he's talking about. Sounds like they got a lot of them and they do well. Don, I wish you extraordinary success and all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you so much for listening. We'll be sure to post Don's contact info in the Destination Angler show notes and pictures of his top fly picks on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can DM me or email me with comments and suggestions at shaig50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please share it with a buddy. As always, our music is by A Brother's Fountain. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.